there are, as I say, lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. In fact, there were two stories the last couple of days that we continue to talk about here, but here's one on the German Synodal Way, right? I mean, they have just been doubling down. I mean, repeatedly, it's like every week or every, there's just some news that comes out of Germany about them embracing what we would consider to be intrinsically evil. Well, yesterday, the Vatican issued a statement on this, and we're going to get into what this means. Here's the headline out of LifeSide News. Pope taps brakes on German bishops' synodal way until, big word there, until Universal Church considers proposals. Let me first go to the CNA article where its headline says, full text of statement by the Holy See on German Synodal Way. Let me read to you this statement, or at least, it's very short. It's pretty simple. Let me read it to you, just so you can get the context here. It says, quote, in order to safeguard the freedom of the people of God and the exercise of the episcopal ministry, it seems necessary to clarify that the synodal way in Germany does not have the power to compel bishops and the faithful to adopt new forms of governance and new orientations of doctrine and morals. Oh, praise be to God. It's good. We don't want them to compel the faithful to have to contradict church teaching, doctrines and dogma, what we believe even in natural law, right? The statement from the Vatican goes on to say, quote, it would not be lawful to initiate in the dioceses prior to an agreed understanding at the level of the Universal Church new official structures or doctrines which would constitute a violation of ecclesial communion and a threat to the unity of the Church. In this sense, the Holy Father called to mind in his letter to the pilgrim people of God in Germany, the Universal Church lives in and of the particular churches, just as the particular churches live and flourish in and from the Universal Church. If they find themselves separated from the entire ecclesial body, they weaken, rot, and die. Hence, the need always to ensure communion with the whole body of the Church. Therefore, it is desirable that the proposals made by the particular churches in Germany may be incorporated into the synodal process on which the Universal Church is undertaking in order to contribute to mutual enrichment and to bear witness to the unity with which the body of the Church manifests its fidelity to Christ the Lord. Close quote. Now, I am not the Pope. I don't even look like the Pope. I have no say whatsoever in anything that happens officially in the Catholic Church. So there you go. But if I were to write such a statement, it would have read something more along the lines of, Dear Germany, stop it.
Or else.
And that would have been it. I mean, bottom line, have a great day. And that would have been the full statement whatsoever. But no, I think that last sentence is really the kicker in the whole thing. Like, yes, you can't be compelled. You got to be careful. You should be like, it's just sort of this circular language going on, which is pretty standard fare coming out of the Vatican. And by the way, we also just want to incorporate this into the big picture. Wait, hold on. What? I'm sorry. Did you just say you wanted to incorporate what they're doing in Germany into the Universal Church? What? Hold on. Let's go to the LifeSite News article here. The LifeSide News article looking at this says, quote, after the Vatican clarified today in a statement to the German bishops that the synodal way could not operate on its own apart from the Holy See without violating ecclesial communion, it then indicated that the proposals of the German prelates should be incorporated into the synodal process on which the Universal Church is traveling in order to contribute to mutual enrichment. That is actually kind of scary, to be honest with you.
Joe, the thing about mutual enrichment, it's always kind of like triggered in my mind is
triggered is keyword there.
Triggers, exactly. The idea of mutual enrichment implies that there's something good in both things. Like, for instance, when you get married, you ideally you would mutually enrich one another because you both have good things about you. You both have some virtues, and some of you both have vices. You both have defects, and you mutually enrich one another by complimenting one another.
I got
At least
it.
ideally.
Okay. I'm writing it down.
Right. I'm just giving you marriage advice. You're welcome. You're welcome.
This is amazing.
But the situation here, it implies that there is something good in all these different things, right?
Right.
And I
Sure.
think that's very dangerous to say
You
that
think?
they can, a little bit. I think a little bit.
Un poquito, as we
poquito.
say down south.
Yes,
Un
exactly.
poquito. The article goes on to say the clarification comes in the midst of a storm of controversy regarding the German bishop's proposal on changing the church's teaching on sexual morality, the nature of marriage, contraception, the ordained priesthood, Holy Communion, ecclesial governance, and abortion. Good grief, they didn't throw in gravity in there. Maybe they ought to consider, renouncing gravity. I'm fully in favor of that, by the way. I would love to get rid of gravity.
It's always keeping you down.
Yeah, trust me. Yes, it is. Anyway, then they go on to read the statement, which I've just read for you from the CNA article. But skipping past that, it says the most recent of the heretical proposals coming from Germany called for, quote, nationwide provision of abortion, close quote, a demand voiced by Ermi Stetter Karp. Boy, I bet I messed that up, and I'm sorry. The Catholic laywoman who is co-president of the German Synodal Way. As LifeSite News reported earlier this year, a document approved by participants in a 174 to 22 vote calls for a re-evaluation of church teaching against homosexuality and revision of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, claiming that homosexual acts are not a sin, close quote. Yikes. The open dissent from Catholic moral teaching among the German episcopate prompted Australian Cardinal George Pell in April to call on the Pope to reaffirm the unchanging doctrine and tradition of the Church. Quote, undoubtedly, the Holy Father will have to speak on this matter to clarify and reiterate the tradition. Pell said at the time in an interview. He goes on to say, quote, the special role of the papacy is to maintain the purity of the apostolic tradition and to maintain the unity of the church around that tradition, close quote. I wonder if they should remind him of that by memo or something. Could they just send a little love note to His Holiness and say, by the way, your job is to maintain the traditions handed on, the purity of the apostolic teaching. That would be,
Joe, not to go off on a weird track here, but it just reminds me, I'm a father, and my daughter, she's going to turn 1 next week, and she loves Winnie the Pooh. So we watch Winnie the Pooh. I think it's the 70s version of it. And there's a scene in this movie where one of the characters is looking for a house, and he finds a house that belongs to somebody else, and he's giving it away to somebody else. And everybody's kind of all the characters are thinking oh, okay, well, are you sure you want to do that? That house belongs to somebody else. Do you really want to do that? But everybody seems to be kind of jumping in and allowing this character's delusions to allow him to give this house that doesn't belong to him to somebody else. And it reminds me of the situation here, right?
Yeah.
We're expecting leadership from the top, from His Holiness Pope Francis. And instead he's saying, well, why don't we all just kind of let's see if there's anything good here that could culturally enrich us here, mutually enrich us here, and in reality, we're just giving into the delusions of the German Synodal Way to the detriment of the entire church. This is a first step to opening the door for all manner of crazy things all over the world. And we're just flabbergasted that there's no leadership, there's no stop, there doesn't seem to be any sort of filter at all. This is crazy.
But it gets better.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
It does get better. For instance, here's this other article out of LifeSite News where the headline says, Vatican-approved journalist suggests Pope Francis might soon contradict Church's birth control ban. So just wait. There's more. There's more.
At least we're getting clarity.
Real quick here, it says a Vatican-approved publication has published an article asking if Pope Francis might write a new encyclical or apostolic exhortation on bioethics in line with a recent document from the Pontifical Academy for Life, which undermines certain aspects of Catholic morality. Now, we've discussed this already a couple of times this week alone, but basically they put out this article. They're calling into question whether or not contraception should become more normal under air quotes certain circumstances. For instance, like the Louisiana bishops have made that sort of seemingly endorsing the use of emergency contraception in the cases of rape. We discussed that with David L. Gray this week, by the way. But what I find interesting about this story is, one, this document that was published, usually they get approved by the Vatican prior to publishing. So were they on this one? I don't know, but there is an interesting link there. But there's another article out of CNA today. Pontifical Academy for Life board member, church says church teaching on contraception has not changed. And I read through this article, and it's interesting. Dr. Monica Lopez Borjona, a member of the board of directors of the Pontifical Academy for Life and president of the Jerome Lejeune Foundation in Spain, has clarified that the recent publication of a book by the Academy hasn't changed the bioethical magisterium of the church. Quote, "It's not true that the church or the magisterium have changed their moral criteria regarding some questions of bioethics, not even that the Vatican has begun a process of reviewing these issues," Lopez stressed in a statement released in the form of an interview to which ACI Presna, CNA Spanish language sister news agency, has access. Now, okay, so let me summarize, because we're getting down to the wire here on this segment. The interesting thing about this article over at CNA and this lady's comments about this is, one, she's like making like sort of a generic statement. Yes, nothing has changed. We put out our articles and the church doesn't change just because we're having these conversations. Okay, fair enough. But then in the interview, as this article at CNA sort of makes clear, she's basically throwing a shot back and saying, listen, this was never brought to the board's attention. We never discussed this prior to publication. They just went off and did this. You know, the Jesuit who published that article, that book, they just went off and did this of their own accord. They didn't ask our opinion or whether or not we thought this was a good idea. They just did it. So I think that this particular doctor is basically saying, this is not good. We're not happy with this. We don't agree to this, but I'm just trying to read in between the lines there. But if, in fact, going back to Germany, they're simply saying, hey, hold up, guys. Let's just take some of your proposals and make them the law of the land for the whole church. That would be devastating and bad. Let's pray, fast, and do penance